Welcome to Essential C.S. Lewis on YouTube, a feature of EssentialCSLewis.com. I'm William O'Flaherty. The following is the first of two talks by C. Ben Mitchell, given in April 2026 at the Inklings Weekend in Montreat. Unfortunately, due to an unforeseen technical issue, the audio quality is not as good as it could be.
I'm grateful to be able not only to be here, but also to have two opportunities to speak, because there's so much I want to say. I'll never say all that I want to say, but I want to at least prompt a conversation among us. I want to begin this morning by thinking with you about how we got here. And I'll tell you where here is and what that means in just a moment. And then tomorrow I want to focus on how, or I should say, where we're going and how we can respond, how to avoid or resist a post-human future. But before that, I want us to talk about or think about how we got here from disenchantment to re-enchantment. You will know that November 2022 was a cultural inflection point, not just in America, but internationally. Artificial intelligence had embedded itself into our psyche and into our lives in many different ways. Some of them imperceptible, like the autocomplete on our smartphones, or autocomplete on our word processing systems. We were, as one author puts it, we were changed when we weren't looking. Digital technology seemed at first like an unmixed boon, an extension of capacities that allowed us to do the same thing, but better, faster, more efficiently. Better, faster, more efficiently. Because November 2022, of course, was the date that OpenAI made ChatGPT, a large language model, free to the public and open to everyone. And now we have other tools like it, including Grok and Claude and others that you may be familiar with. And now, when you go to Google and you enter a search, you get an AI summary at the beginning of the search. And so AI is already part of our lives. It's with us. It's going to continue to grow and find its way into the cracks and crevices of our existence. And we want to ask the question, what does that mean? And how do we respond in the AI age? One of the challenges of AI, and one of the challenges of especially the chat GPT or chatbot technologies, is that we've set a new record for capital investment in these technologies. OpenAI invested $40 billion in venture capital, a record in the venture capital arena, and there are now more than $1.5 trillion aimed at the development of artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence technologies. And the challenge is almost none of the cents, C-E-N-T-S, of those dollars are being focused on the ethical, social, and legal implications of artificial intelligence, except how to market it to us, how to use us as the feeders for this artificial intelligence machine. But I want to begin by telling you a story as we talk about artificial intelligence, a real story, about a woman named Sarah who's referred to me, this is not her name, a woman named Sarah who's referred to me by my pastors. Sarah works in the energy arena in the Chattanooga area, and Sarah came to me to say that she thought she was, as a Christian, going to have to leave her job because her conscience would not allow her to do what they're asking her to do. I'm not unfamiliar with that kind of complaint, but this was a new version of that complaint, because Sarah said to me, we have orders from on high in our company that we must use ChatGPT, this large language model that I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. This large language model in our jobs. And she said, first of all, because I'm committed to the notion that there are property rights that should be respected, and because this large language model goes out onto the internet, or the interweb, as it were, and scrapes data from all the things that we've ever put on electronic digital media, I know that I am using data, I am using information, I'm using resources that are the intellectual property of authors who have not given their permission to use their material, nor are getting any remuneration for the use of their material. So I'm violating intellectual property rights as I use this tool. That's my first concern. I believe that's important. Number two, she said, we all know now, and she learned then, that as she's building her reports and her analyses that she does on her job, as she's building her reports, that ChatGPT will introduce what I refuse to call anymore hallucinations, because that's to anthropomorphize the technology, but confabulations, or just makes crap up. That ChatGPT will just make things up. And there have been numerous legal officials, lawyers, and judges who have had in their reports or their briefs or their documents, they have had citations added to their legal briefs that never occurred. There are journal articles in science and medicine that have data that have never appeared anywhere, but ChatGPT and other chatbots abhor a vacuum, and so they will create information if that information does not exist. And so she said, as a person who's committed to truth, I worry that I am being complicit when ChatGPT introduces lies into my analyses, and I'm not able to catch them all. The volume is just so dense that I can't possibly catch all of those lies, and this is happening in the humanities as well. And then she said, thirdly, she said, I know that I am contributing to the growth of a technology that is going to take away jobs from friends of mine who are just now entering the workplace. And she says, I worry that I'm being complicit in that. So I listened to Sarah for a bit, and I thought, well, you know, I'm an ethicist, so I know how to answer that question. You're a person under authority. But before I could get those words out of my mouth, Sarah said, and it doesn't help that I grew up in Nuremberg, Germany, where we had someone in office who told us what to do, and our entire culture, nearly our entire culture, followed what Adolf Hitler had to say, because we were used to following authority. So your assignment over coffee today is to answer the question, what should Sarah do? What should Sarah do? That's what she wanted me to talk with her about. How would you counsel Sarah? Before we can talk about artificial intelligence, and if you haven't seen the humor in this slide yet, you're not paying attention. But will future generations know that Lewis didn't have a Mac? Before we can talk about artificial intelligence, I want to talk about bicycles. In a wonderful essay that Lewis published in a journal called Resistance, and it's now in Present Concerns, the volume that Walter Hooper edited, Lewis has a conversation with another person about bicycles. And he says, the bicycle is one instance that I want to talk about. He says, there are 4 stages about nearly everything, and bicycles is the case in point, but these stages apply to everything. Let's give them names. They're the unenchanted age, the enchanted age, the disenchanted age, and the re-enchanted age. As a little child, I was unenchanted about bicycles. Then when I first learned to ride, I was enchanted. By 16, I was disenchanted, and now I'm re-enchanted. before I tell you about that, I have to have a little bit of freedom to tell you about the time I almost became famous. I was bicycling in Oxford. I would hire a bicycle, rent a bicycle, or sometimes took one over on a plane. And in my effort to be Oxfordian, as it were, I would ride the bicycle. And I was coming out Observatory Street. There's a little green grocer where that lady is standing, and about where she is, carrying 2 bags of groceries, was Walter Hooper. This, by the way, is taken by our friend Stan Shelley, who's here. And this was at one of the Inklings conferences in Oxford. But Walter was, and I didn't know I hadn't met him, but I knew who he was. I recognized him immediately as he's carrying the 2 groceries near that corner, and I'm coming around the corner and almost take Walter Hooper out. I could have been famous for killing Walter Hooper, and I'm so glad that I was not guilty of doing so. So Lewis talks about this era of unenchantment about bicycles. He said, I've been through these 4 stages. I can remember a time early childhood when a bicycle meant nothing to me. It was just a huge, meaningless part of the background, the grown-up gadgets against which life went on. And his illustration of it is of discovering women. He said, remember a time when you were unenchanted by boys or girls, men or women. They didn't really mean anything to you until he says, I fell in love, and that became enchantment. So unenchanted, enchantment. And he says, if anyone writes an unenchanted book, it's good for nothing but to be burned in the fire. Get rid of it. It's not disenchantment. It's just this guy or this woman has nothing to say. So get rid of it. And so he spends more time unpacking the notion of enchantment. Then there came a time when, as I was learning to ride the bicycle, spinning along on my own early in the morning under the trees, in and out of the shadows, it was like entering paradise. That apparently effortless and frictionless gliding, more like swimming than any other motion, but really most like the discovery of a 5th element that seemed to have solved the secret of life. Now one would begin to be happy. Lewis was enchanted with the technology, enchanted with this device that he had come now to love. Lewis, I'm going to argue, had a particular ontology, a particular way of understanding how we as human beings inhabit the world, that he, as we heard last night, that was part of the myth of humanity around the world, but that he came to understand as true myth. And it wasn't hard for someone who had invested their life in first understanding Norse mythology, but also remember that Lewis's early training was as a philosopher proper, studying the greats, studying philosophy. And so Lewis inhabited a world in which there were true spiritual hierarchies. There were gods and men, and there were angels and demons. There were all kinds of spiritual realities, not just stories, but realities that corresponded to the stories. And he talks about this just a little bit in his introduction to Harding's The Hierarchy of Heaven and Earth. And I actually haven't read Harding, but I have read Lewis's introduction, where he says the process where we've come to know the universe is from one point of view extremely complicated, from another alarmingly simple. We can observe a single one-way progression. At the outset, listen to this, at the outset, the universe appears to be packed with will and intelligence and life and positive qualities. Every tree is a nymph and every planet a god. Man himself is akin to the gods. He has this enchanted view, enchanted understanding of the world in which we live. And in his sermon preached on Pentecost in Mansfield College, he puts it this way, and I have a lot of quotes from Lewis. Forgive me for that. I don't have to say that here. Enjoy. Pictures are part of the visible world themselves and represented only by being part of it. Their visibility has the same source as its. It's what? It's the visible world. The suns and lamps in pictures seem to shine only because real suns or lamps shine on them. That is, they seem to shine a great deal because they really shine a little in reflecting their archetypes. The sunlight in a picture is therefore not, listen to this, the sunlight in a picture is therefore not related to real sunlight simply as written words are to spoken words. It is a sign, yes, but also something more than a sign. And only a sign because it's also more than a sign, because in it, the thing signified is really in a certain mode present. The thing signified, the thing that we see, is really in a certain mode real and existent and present. If I had to name the relation, I should call it not symbolical, but sacramental. Lewis inhabited, and Tolkien and other Inklings, but Lewis and Tolkien for certain, inhabited a sacramental ontology, a sacramental understanding of the world, the creation of the one who made the world. A sacrament, of course, is an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. An outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. So it points to the reality, that invisible grace. It is not merely a symbol, it is a sacrament. It is not merely like words on the page, but it carries with it a certain spiritual meaning, this sacrament. And we can spend a lot of time talking about sacramental theology, but not now. Hans Boersma, in his book that I highly recommend to you, Heavenly Participation, describes sacramental ontology this way. Sacramental ontology insists that not only does the created world point to God as its source, and we're all familiar with that metaphor. The book of nature points to God, but he says it not only points to God as its source and point of reference, but it also subsists and participates in God. In other words, because creation is a sharing of the being of God, our connection with God is a participatory or real connection, not just an external or nominal connection. This is our Father's world, we just sang. And he is omnipresent in this world, is the confession of the Jewish and Christian traditions. Right? The God who is there, the God who is with us, the God who is present, the God who is omnipresent. And we, I'll say more about this in a moment, we and this world participate in God in that way. We are not separated by a impermeable division between us and the heavens, but there is no division, there is no separation between us and the God who made us. He is here. He is there. He is there. He is here. He is here. He is here. God is with us. And yet, Boersma, nor Lewis, of course, are pantheists. But there's a difference in saying that God is in us and that we participate in the reality of the creation that God has made and dwells in. And Lewis alludes to this in his fiction, right? He's a Christian Platonist. And so we read this lovely line in the last battle. It's all in Plato. It's all in Plato. Bless me, what do they teach in these schools? This sacramental ontology is ancient in its origins, as ancient as creation, of course, but people have thought about it even before then. We need to be reminded, Lewis said, that what became fact was a myth, that it carries with it the world of fact, all the properties, it carries into the world of fact, all the properties of the myth. God is more than God, not less. Christ is more than Balder, one of the Norse gods. God is more than Balder, not less. Christ is more than Balder, not less. We must not be ashamed of the mythical radiance resting on our theology. We must not be nervous about parallels with pagan Christ. They ought to be there, because this is a world that is full of spiritual realities and spiritual hierarchies. For this is the marriage of heaven and earth, perfect myth and perfect fact, claiming not only our love and our obedience, but also our wonder and delight, addressed to the savage, the child, the poet, in each one of us, no less than the moralist, the scholar, and the philosopher. Do you see it? You see, he's enchanted by a world that is teeming, alive, with spiritual reality, with sacramental reality, not the kind of materialist world that we have inherited. More about that in just a moment. We are, as Rebecca alluded, we are these humans in between sorts of creatures, lower than the gods, higher than the beasts, not simply body, but also not simply mind or spirit, rather the place where the body and spirit meet and are united and reconciled in the life of each person. Augustine puts it this way: God created man's nature as a kind of mean between angels and beasts. We are part of this created order that God has made, alive with angels and beasts and us. And then disenchantment. Of course, I soon reached the third period, he said, pedaling to and fro from school, one of those journeys that feel uphill both ways, in all weathers, and soon revealed the prose of cycling against poetry, of course. The bicycle itself became to me what his oar is to a galley slave. We are living, most of us, we are living in the disenchanted age. We've left our simple enchantment, and we've now become sophisticated and wise in our own eyes. If you haven't read Paul Kingsnorth's Against the Machine yet on the unmaking of humanity, it's worth your time. Kingsnorth observes, by the way, an interesting guy. He was a environmentalist and a Wiccan at one point. Think about that now. He had already been taught to understand that nature is alive and real and there are spiritual beings. And he said, without searching, without trying, he became a Christian. And he has a story to tell about that. It's worth hearing it from his own voice. But Paul Kingsnorth is a Christian. He's Orthodox, capital O Orthodox. And in his recent book, Against the Machine, he says, it's often suggested that when we move from Christendom via the Enlightenment into our current age, whatever we might call it, we desacralized, took the sacred out, or disenchanted our culture. We became pure materialists. For its proponents, this process was a move towards reason and away from superstition. For opponents, it represented a slide into decadence and moral dissolution. The fate of our times, wrote pioneering sociologist Max Weber, is characterized by rationalization and intellectualization, and above all, the disenchantment of the world. And we are living, I would argue, in a disenchanted age. Kingsnorth puts it this way: the 18th century's two revolutions, the revolution of reason and the revolution of technology, were supposed to walk us towards a universal paradise. This was the promise. life through technology. Instead, we live in a time of mass extinction and cultural disintegration. The ethos of the machine, and the machine is all of the everything that technology means in our culture. It's not one thing, it's a way of inhabiting the world. The ethos of the machine is expansion, the bursting of limits, because we don't like limits, Rebecca reminded us. The bursting of limits and the consumption of whatever can be sold to us to meet the needs of the individual self, which the machine constructed for us in the first place. Because one of the observations that many have made about technology is that not only do we form our technologies, then they form us. And think about how hard it is for you not to be on your phone right now. Well, because our technologies have formed us to have a certain set of expectations of what will be available to us. And woe if we don't have the password to the Wi-Fi. But of all nature's functions operate within limits. They rely for their continual operation on a healthy balance of the complex and delicate systems that a living planet brings about. And we know this history, we've heard this history. This is the history of the faith-science dialogue. Dr. Poe and Jimmy Davis, our late colleague, have written much about that, and we should go back and rehearse what they have taught us. But we have mechanized the universe. All of our metaphors now about not only the universe, but about the human body are now metaphors of the machine. The clockwork machine, or the machinery of the cell. Or our brains are just computers made of meat. We are meat machines, someone has said. Because we have focused on hypercognition as the way of understanding what it means to be human. We've moved from enchantment to disenchantment because we now think we have it all figured out. What it means to be a human being is to be a thinking, intelligent being that has reason and reflection, can consider itself as itself the same thinking thing in different times and places, which it does not only by consciousness, which is inseparable from thinking, and as it seems to be essential to it. And now you know who you are. You're a thinking thing. You are just a brain on a stick. And your embodiment means nothing but as a way of moving the brain from place to place. And once we can digitize the capacities of the brain, you no longer have to have a material body. You can, and that's tomorrow, but you no longer have to have a material body. We have bought Descartes' famous axiom that actually began, I like the way this slide puts it. I didn't create the slide entirely, but I like the way it puts it. He began his process with systematic doubt. He was going to doubt everything he possibly could to see what there was that was left. And he said, so I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. I'm a thinking thing, and so I'm just a brain in a vat. That's all we are. Just a brain in a vat. And some saw where we were going. In Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, this case in point, that she was prescient and saw the direction we were going. Think about the subtitle, The Modern Prometheus, as an important lesson to be learned. Lewis tells us about this. I'll have to hurry. He says in the Way to Glory sermon, surely you've read this, but I love what he's doing here. He says, do you think I'm trying to weave a spell as he's preaching and telling the story? Do you think I'm trying to weave a spell? Perhaps I am. But remember your fairy tales? Spells are used for breaking enchantments as well as inducing them. And you and I have need of the strongest spell that can be found to wake us from the evil enchantment of worldliness, which has been laid upon us for nearly 100 years. Almost our whole education has been directed to silencing this shy, persistent inner voice. Almost all our modern philosophies have been devised to convince us that the good of man is to be found on this earth. And yet, it's remarkable that such philosophies of progress or creative evolution themselves bear redundant witness to the truth that our real goal is elsewhere. See, it cannot be finally hidden. The sacramental ontology cannot finally be veiled. It's still there. When they want to convince you the earth is your home, notice how they said about it. They began by trying to persuade you earth could be made into heaven, thus giving us a sop to your sense of exile in the earth as it is. Next, they'll tell you this fortunate event is still a good way off in the future, thus giving you a sop to your knowledge that the fatherland is not here and now. Finally, lest you're longing for the trans-temporal, here's that idea again, the trans-temporal, that reality that transcends time and space. The trans-temporal should awake and spoil the whole affair. They use any rhetoric that comes to hand to keep out of your mind the recollection that even if all the happiness they promised could come to man on earth, yet still each generation would lose it by death, including the last generation of all, and the whole story would be nothing, not even a story, forever and ever. Disenchantment. Lights out. I'm going to skip this for now, but in his inaugural lecture at Cambridge, you'll find Lewis repeating some of the same kinds of themes. I didn't create this image. Somebody apparently reproduced the abolition of man with this cover, which I think is probably fitting. And he said in Abolition, for the wise men of old, the cardinal problem had been how to conform the soul to reality, and the solution to knowledge, self-discipline, virtue. For magic and the applied science alike, the problem is how to subdue reality to the wishes of men, and the solution is a technique, it's a technology. Technology is the answer to our problem now. We've changed the human condition into the user experience. Fearfully and wonderfully made into my body, my property. The great transcendentals, the true, the good, the beautiful, the artificial intelligence, we've gone from the garden to the data farm. Disenchantment. Carl Truman released a book this week where he says disenchantment's not strong enough a word. It's desecration. We have desacralized, desecrated the world and us, and therefore the God who made us through our journey of disenchantment. And not only that, we made the world boring. Just boring. But there's hope. There's hope. In Weight of Glory, Lewis said, we do not want merely to see beauty, though God knows even that bounty is enough. We want something else which can hardly be put into words, to be united with beauty we see, to pass into it. Notice he said pass into this beauty, to receive it into ourselves, to bathe in it, to become part of it. That's why we have peopled air and earth and water with gods and goddesses and nymphs and elves, that though we cannot, yet these projections can enjoy in themselves that beauty, grace, and power of which nature is the image. And I would say this again is that glimpse of the sacramental ontology. We participate in the true, the good, and the beautiful. That is, we participate in God. And some of us have just been through the reminder that we came from the dust, we're going back to the dust, and in the resurrection that we will be raised from the dead and returned to the God who has made us. But he says, disenchantment has left us with an empty universe. For time's sake, I'm going to skip this. It's a long one, but it's really, really good. And this comes from the introduction that I mentioned to the empty universe. The empty universe in the introduction to Hierarchy of Heaven and Earth, the new diagram. I'm happy to share my slides with you, and William is recording this, so you can go back and grab those if you wish. One of our friends that Hal mentioned earlier is Alison McGrath, and McGrath has pleaded with us to re-enchant, as it were, to re-enchant the world through the use of what he calls natural, and has been called natural theology. Notice his title, The Re-enchantment of Nature, because the stakes are high. Look outside. We have been entrusted with the jewel of God's creation. Look inside. We have been entrusted with the jewel of God's creation and given the responsibility of tending and nurturing it. We're like curators of great art and a great art collection, and are accountable to our posterity for how we guard that stewardship. In transposition, Lewis talks about our humanity as being our humanity being understood through a Christological anthropology, similar to Athanasius. I'm sure he is alluding here to Athanasius. For we're told in one of the creed, he is alluding to the creed, of course, that the incarnation worked not by conversion of the Godhead into the flesh, but by making manhood into God. And it seems to me there's a real analogy between this and what I've called transposition, that humanity still remaining itself is not merely, listen, humanity still remaining itself is not merely counted as, but veritably drawn into deity. Drawn into deity. Doesn't mean that we're becoming gods, but the God who made us draws us to him, to himself. I wish you were here. I know what Nigel would say. That's what Nigel would say. Here's what he has said. You remember, we are human beings, not human doings. God has made us not just to be tool makers, and he has, and tool users, and he has, but he's made us to live a life before him. A life that is both, as Nigel would say, up and out. He pleaded with the former president of Wheaton College to have at least one day a week technology free. One day a week re-enchanted with a world that was not mediated by a screen. And Dr. Lipton chuckled and said, I wish it could be so. Howard remembered the time that one of our colleagues at Union told us in a faculty meeting that you remember that space out there on the lawn where Wi-Fi wouldn't reach? Well, we fixed that now. So there's now no place on campus where you can divest yourself of a screen. It's a disenchanted world. When God has placed us in a world teeming with beauty and power and love. And you know, we're not the only ones to know this. This is an announcement. I'm about to wind up. This is an announcement of a conference coming up in New York State in a Bruderhof community. This is not sponsored by the Bruderhof, although the Bruderhof have a lot to say about this. But this is a group called, I love the title. I have to think about this a lot every time I say it. They call themselves Doomer Optimists. Doomer Optimists. In the short term, they're doomers. In the long term, they're optimists. I don't know how a Christian could be other than that, but in any case, doomer optimists. And they're saying that we can live well in an age of the machine. And here are some of their themes. I'm not recommending this to you. I just want you to see that people are thinking about this, and that there is a way of having this conversation that I think can help us to re-enchant our world. A critique of capitalism. By the way, the capitalism that AI and other digital technologies are offering now is called consumer capitalism. Shoshana Zuboff has written a book on consumer capitalism where she makes the case that chatbots and social media and other technologies that we're all using are gathering all our data so that they can market it back to us and sell us things that we don't really need. Notice regenerative agriculture and conservation, the role of young fathers in the church, and young mothers as well. Localism, populism, the working class, automation, surveillance, and the right to repair. Think about that. Future of publishing in the arts in the age of AI, defense of piracy in light of the AI revolution. That wasn't privacy, by the way. It is the defense of piracy. Kids and technology, where to draw the lines, good, bad, in the technological arena, the importance of story, myth, and the value of classical education in today's society. These are some of the themes that they're going to unpack in their retreat. These are worthy considerations for us in the age of disenchantment, the age of machine. And they spend a lot of time around the campfire, or the fire pit, the dinner table, and other places, having a conversation, not just listening to old men talk. Because God is a majestic God who has invested or vested his universe with a sacramental ontology, as it were. And Lewis has captivated my imagination to think about the world in a re-enchanted way instead of a disenchanted way. And I hope in this beautiful setting of Black Mountain, you'll have time to be re-enchanted with those gorgeous dogwoods out there, re-enchanted around the coffee clutch, re-enchanted around the dinner table, re-enchanted in times of prayer and meditation, because God has made this world glorious and beautiful. It's fallen, but he's coming back. There'll be a great homecoming. Read N.T. Wright's recent book, God's Homecoming. There'll be a great homecoming, and the promise is that we'll all sit together at the marriage supper of the Lamb. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed watching Dr. Mitchell's talk. His second talk will be posted within a few weeks after this one. What do you think about what he shared? Do you agree or disagree? How dangerous is AI? If there are any proper uses for it, what are they? And how can Christians positively influence AI? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching Essential C.S. Lewis on YouTube, a feature of EssentialCSLewis.com. I'm William O'Flaherty. I also have a YouTube channel called Adult Autism with William, where I share about only learning I was autistic at the age of 60, along with understanding level 1 autism from the perspective of an adult. The channel has also interviews with other autistic adults. At EssentialCSLewis.com, you can find a variety of material, including various interviews with authors related to Lewis and sometimes live recordings. Please consider liking, sharing this video, and subscribing to this channel. Finally, please follow the link in the description to learn about my latest book, the Screwtape Letters Handbook. Also, there will be a link to my other book from 2018, The Misquotable C.S. Lewis. Thanks again for watching.